So she had never seen her. My father held that picture near and dear. Nobody got near it. So he's now like, what is going on? And it all seems like I am in the center of all these strange happenings that people are saying are not happening, but there are people there who are like, no, I saw it. It happened. So years pass and nobody ever speaks of it again. I didn't hear this story until I was probably 13, 14 years old, and something happened then which caused my mother to even tell it to me. And then at some point I asked my father, and my father actually confirmed the same story. So, cut to, I'm about 5 or 6 now. And in between the story at 2 and me being about 5 or 6, I've had several incidents where I see people who other people don't see. Stuff is moving through the house that shouldn't be moving. Like, it's just all types of weird poltergeist movie type strangeness going on everywhere I go. Which is starting to make people look at me like there's something wrong with me as a child. So, cut to, I'm about 5, maybe 6. And this is the story that I told on my previous podcast, which is what caused someone to ask me this question about what was actually going on at the time. I'm about 5 or 6 and I am at Woolworth's counter. You got to be up in age to remember Woolworth's food counter. Now, I was at Woolworth's food counter and my mom used to take me there like once a week or so to get these donuts that I love. They were, I always called them the curly Q circle donuts and the figure eights because it was a glazed donut in the shape of a figure eight and a French cruller. And they were my favorites. She took me to go get donuts and a woman sits down next to me. Now, at some point as we leave, this woman leaves and we're standing at the bus stop together. And I make a comment about the woman's husband passing, who apparently was very much alive at the time because a conversation takes place later on, which I don't think I talked about in the last podcast, but, you know, a whole conversation takes place and she talks to my mom. Either way, I made this statement to the woman and he was sick, but he wasn't dead yet. Because as I got older, you know, I asked my mother if she remembered that, and she remembered the woman's name, and I started researching to find out that it wasn't too much longer after that. There's an obit for him. But that's neither here nor there. I had made the statement. The woman looks at me crazy. My mom basically snatches me up on a bus. As I get older, that starts to happen to me more and more. I would be around certain people and I would get this strong feeling, you're about to lose your grandmother in about 2 or 3 days. And then because I was still young, I would say these things out loud without thinking. And then when it would happen, these are not people that my family actually knows. They can come back and be like, hey, that kid of yours. It had gotten to the point where my mother's godmother started to become nervous every time I was around. Because I think she kept thinking that one day I was going to look at her and be like, "Ooh, tomorrow's going to be looking bad for you." And that's not how this works. Or at least I don't think so. And I've never done that. It's typically I'm around people who are connected to other people. And I sense there's somebody around you. And I can tell you, like, I told her when her godparents had passed away. Like right at the moment. We were doing something and I looked up and I told my sister, I was like, he's gone. And we need to call her because he's gone. They were like, oh no, we don't need to call her yet. And I'm like, yeah, you need to go ahead and call her. It's a wrap for him. And they wouldn't listen to me. My sister always believed me because, like I said, I always told things to my sister. So my sister is like, y'all might want to make that phone call. Nobody wanted to listen. I am the crazy spooky kid. And then when he passed away, they had to make that call. And I'm sitting there and it was like, wait a minute. I tried to tell you. Then when his wife passed away, same thing happened. I was hanging out at my grandmother's house. I looked up at my sister and was like, she's not going to make it to see Christmas. It's either going to be the day before Christmas Eve or the day before that, but she will not make it to see Christmas. And I kept on doing what I was doing because that's how it used to hit me, just all out of nowhere. And I would just speak what came to my mind and not going about my business. So I said it to my sister, like I always do. Because my sister, I'm telling you, was like my confidant, my I don't even want to say security blanket, but like a lockbox for me. Like I could put all the secrets there. And I knew she wasn't going to go around and tell everybody, and she wasn't about to look at me like I was insane, like everybody else did. So I tell my sister, and we go on back about our business. And then come Christmas Eve, his wife passes away. And I looked at my grandmother and I told her, I tried to tell you. Because I said it out loud with her sitting there, and she basically, don't you say that. I tried to tell you. I try to tell you things so you're prepared. You can go do what you need to do. I tried to tell you. And I just kept repeating, but I told you though. But like I tried to tell you though. It was almost like I was trying to get them to understand I'm not doing this for kicks. This just happens to me. And I feel like I have to speak on it. Now, the opposite end of that is I have a tendency to know when people are pregnant. Down to the point where I knew every single time my sister was pregnant before she was ever pregnant, and I knew the gender of all her children before she ever knew. I also knew when I was pregnant, even though I had a negative pregnancy test twice with my first child, and they told me I had a tumor. I was like, I don't have a tumor, I'm pregnant. Then it takes them 4 months of all this other stuff before they realize it, because I have some condition that actually masks pregnancy from testing. So even with urine and blood tests, it wouldn't come up positive. And they were about to do exploratory surgery on me when my husband at the time begged them to do another blood test on me because he believed in what I was saying. And sure enough, it finally came up positive and they had to stop my procedure. Then they told me I was having a boy. Nope, I'm having a girl. I know I'm having a girl. When I got pregnant the second time, they believed me right off rip. Even with negative pregnancy tests, they just treated it like a pregnancy. First doctor I spoke to was like, oh, well, you just want to be pregnant. No, really don't. Wasn't prepared for this at all. But I know what I know. Check my records. Go back to see one of my previous doctors from my first pregnancy, and she was like, no, I don't care what she tells you, you believe it. Because she knows. Same deal. Oh, we think it's a boy. It's a girl. Because I had seen my children before I was ever pregnant with either one of them. I also knew that there would not be another one. And people always hear me talk about I have 3 children because the man, as I like to call him, has a son. But I have 2 girls. I already knew no other child would ever come. For whatever reason. It doesn't mean I wasn't pregnant again, because I was. And at the time, I was hoping that I was wrong. But I had only seen 2 children for me. That's like I tell people all the time. I knew who I was meant to marry because I saw him 5 years before I ever met him. I had a dream about him and I saw him. I knew his height. I knew his skin color. I knew how he kept his hair cut. I saw him before I'd ever laid eyes on him. And this happens to me to this day. I've gotten better at being able to block out a lot of things because I had gotten to a point in like my early 30s where I actually sat up one day and started screaming. I was like, I don't want this. I don't want this anymore. I believe I have had this long enough and I don't want it anymore. I am over it. It has had people look at me crazy. It has had people think I was crazy. And like, I do not want this anymore. So I got to a point where no matter what I saw, I wouldn't tell anybody anything. And the only person who could get anything out of me was my best friend. Who, if I see something about her to this day, I will call and tell her. Because she was like, I don't have to see what you see to know that you believe what you see and you're actually seeing it. And I'm like, I'm not asking people to hands down believe everything that comes out of my mouth. Hell, half the time I don't believe some of the things that I see. But I'm asking people to have an open enough mind to understand that throughout history, there have been people just like me who tried to warn about wars, and who tried to warn about famines, and who tried to ring the alarm, and no one would listen because we were the crazy people in society. I'm not the only one, and I'm definitely not the first one, and I know I'm not the last. And then finally, I asked a question, which is the same question I asked back then. So let me flip back, and then I'm gonna come back up again. When I was in my teens, that's when that whole thing happened with talking about the godparents both passing away. That's when I finally went to go and see a minister from my church. And when I explained why, they ended up being like 3 ministers there. And I had this whole conversation with them. And in the conversation, after being told that I was to ignore those visions, that there was something evil trying to get after me, and it was trying to take a hold of me, and they then prayed over me, and then set up another baptism for me. Now, mind you, I had just been baptized not even 6 months before. Now, after all of that happened, I simply asked a question. I was like, you can believe in God, sight unseen, because of the miracles you see every day. You can believe in the Bible, even though it's translated by a man. King James Version means that it was because King James had 2 men translate the scrolls. And it is always said that parts of the Bible were missing because there were no words that could use to translate them. So they had to put in it what they felt would be the best way to put those words out there. But you believe in it wholeheartedly, no questions asked. You hands down believe in the word. And I knock nobody's religion and what they believe in. I've read it cover to cover. I prayed in the whole night, but you believe in it. Well, how do you explain trees, and how do you explain air, and how do you explain, childbirth, and how do you explain life? You believe in it because miracles happen around you every day. And it makes me think about something from a movie where somebody was like, you can't see the air, but you keep on breathing. Well, I can't see the air, but I keep on breathing. You can't see God, but you keep on believing. But I'm telling you that something is happening to me, and all of a sudden nobody believes, and I'm crazy or I'm evil. How? How, Sway? How is it that you can believe in one thing, but because you don't understand what's happening to me, it's automatically unbelievable, or it's just evil, or I need yet again another, I almost said exorcism, because that's what it felt like. I needed another baptism because something's wrong with me. Now, remember I told you I was baptized 4 times. When I was about 8 or 9, I went to church with a babysitter, of whom I had told her of an incident that was going to happen with a friend of her sister. When the incident happened, they walked around on eggshells around me for weeks because it was a friend I had never met. I just happened to know my babysitter's sister. So they're looking at me crazy for weeks. Because they couldn't figure out how I was able to tell them what I told them. And she went to her minister about it. Now, mind you, I've known this woman for several years. Never even knew she went to a church. But they had a church home. She went to her minister and told him what I did. So she takes me to church with her while my mama is at work. My mother did not find out about this until probably a couple months after it happened. And she didn't even want to watch me anymore. But she took me to her church. And They call it a baptism, but I'm